Hello, thank you for joining me again. I've got to do a bit of work. I've got a mattock that needs a bit of clean up and a bit of maintenance. I thought I'd do a video on it and show you what I tend to do and see how we get on. But I'm planning to remove the head. Easy enough. I'm going to attack this with the angle grinders. I've got one with a wire wheel on it. That one. And then that one's got a flat wheel on it. So I shall clean it all up and then I shall work on the handle. So I'll get set up and I'll be back with you. As you can see, I've moved outside now. I like to do this type of thing outside because in a wooden shed full of wood dust, you don't really want sparks flying around. As you can see, it does help if you switch your lead on, but that happens. I've got it, as you can see, fully secured in a vise. It always pays if you're using something like this to make sure it's clamped or secured because you don't want it to catch and fly. The wire brush I got in this is a twist knot. It's brilliant for removing rust and flakes and all like that. It's ideal for this type of project. The thing you've got to watch out for when using any wire brush on the angle grinder is when you get near to the edges that it doesn't catch, because sometimes it will grab the edge, so you want to be ready for it. Fortunately, I've done it for so many years now, I'm quite used to it. And I know when to expect it more, but never take it for granted. As you can see, I'm working around the edges of it. I'm trying to get as much done as I can, so while I've got it in one position rather than keep changing the clamping. But it's quite a tedious job, but also quite rewarding, because you start off with a rusty old object, and you can see as you work on it, the metal coming back to life almost. So it's quite rewarding, I enjoy it. Swapped over to the angle grinder with the flat disc on now, just to clean the angles up, because obviously they're a bit battered with hitting into rocks and all. I'm not worried about it getting it over sharp, just sort of getting a fairly consistent angle, grinding it back to what it should be like. When using something like the angle grinder, I advise you to use the proper safety gear. It flicks out bits of rust and sparks and general dust and shite, and the old rust dust, you don't want to be breathing that in. That'll do you no good at all. So it might not look cool to wear the gear, but I advise wearing it. You can see the difference already when you look at it, because you've got the dull rust and then it almost looks black from this angle, so it's all cleaned off and it'll be nearly as good as new. Using the wire brush as opposed to like a grinding disc, because it doesn't really remove any of the metal, it just cleans off the rust and various rubbish on it. But if you was to grind it with like a grinding disc or a flat disc, you'd actually start removing quite a bit of metal to get it about right. And then obviously it's getting thinner and less usable. And always try to keep it moving. You don't really want to sit it in one sort of spot. And where you can see I'm doing the edges, I'm taking a lot more care, using very little pressure so it doesn't grab it. Because as I said before, it will grab it, and you've got to be ready for it, because it will sling the tool out your hand if you aren't careful. and I don't have the trigger locked on when I'm doing something like this, so if it does go, as soon as I let go of the trigger, it will it won't stop instantly, but it will slow it down, so it's less dangerous that way. You can see from the sparks there from the flap disc why I don't do it in my wooden shed. Something this shape is not the easiest thing to get secured in a vise, but you do get there. It just takes a bit of fiddling sometimes. When you're sort of grinding the edges like that with a flap disc or grinding wheel, you do want to keep the machine moving, otherwise you'll find you'll end up digging in and making a sort of how do I say it? You'll end up digging in, and you'll cut away a lot more metal where you don't want it. And all I'm aiming to do is try to keep the angle about right and a fairly straight edge. I try to work it with this, try to use the rotation of the tool so it's going away from the edge rather than going towards it. Getting less chance of grabbing in then. But bits like that come with experience. I've used these for, as I said, many a year. So I'm sort of fairly used to how they perform. Quick look at what it's come out like now. See, it looks a damn sight better than it did when I started. Just inspecting it to make sure I've got the bulk of it. But I do really like refurbing tools and all like this, because it just gives you a bit of a buzz when you see it taken from the old rusted shite up to something that'll last again for years. The generation I grew up in, you didn't chuck anything away if you could help it. You always sort of tried to rebuild it or repair it rather than just chuck it away, or even if you couldn't repair it, you'd save bits of it to use on other projects. But I suppose that's just me. Moved on to the handle now, get that cleaned up. I'm using this little sander. I'm not quite sure, some people call them a detail sander, but they're quite handy for this type of job because they're quite easy to use with one hand. So just got, I think it's about 80 grit sandpaper. No, sorry, 120 I've got on this time. They're just keeping it moving. I'm putting no real pressure on. I'm just trying to clean the bulk of it off. Give it a more usable, because it's becoming very rough on your hands when you used it. It's just been misused over the years and just left go like. I'm moving the sander and the handle so you can then work it on the round. Then if you keep it on one plane too long, you'll end up with a flat spot. So that's why you'll see I'm moving both the handle and the sander at the same time. That way you keep the round nice then. You can see how the wood's cleaning up. You can see the years of grime and all I'm sanding off the top of it. It's surprising how nice the wood looks when you take all that lot off. it's something to just take your time with. You know, you'll feel and see when it looks about right. And when I'm done, with the machine sander, I shall then go over it by hand and just finish it off by hand, because you can get a much better finish on this type of project with that. When I get to as I'm working up to the top, I shall only give that bit a very light sand, because of the way the mattock and pickaxes and all work. They're held on like a reverse taper, so it gets thicker away from the head of the handle, so then it doesn't fly off. And if I take too much off there, it won't grip, so I'm only giving that a quick clean up sand. I aren't doing much on that bit. Cleaning up the very top and taking the edge off and all. I want to get the surface off, so when I put the oil, especially on the end grain, it'll soak in then if it's all cleaned off. Also, I put a bit of a round on the end, so it's less likely to splinter out then if you've got a bit of round on it. Yeah, I think that looks a lot better. I shall do some hand sanding on it, but I won't bore you with the contents of that. I'm sure you could all use a bit of sandpaper, like, and then I shall move on to the next step and get it oiled up and finished. I'll catch you in a bit. Hello there, welcome back all. So I've sanded the biggest of it all. It's far from perfect, but at the end of the day it's a mattock handle. Just sanded it mainly with the machine, with a little sander, but gone over it with a hand sand to finish it off. Now's the time to give it some oil. What I'm using is some boiled linseed oil. I use it for all of my
well, pretty much all the handles, whether they be for shovels, axes, hammers, rakes, any of your wooden handles. Putting plenty on the end grain because that's where it'll sort of it'll soak it in then and give it more preservative then. Granted, this video I've done on the mattock, but it's only because that's what I had to do. You can use the same principle for pretty much any of the tools really. You know, I've cleaned it off with obviously me angle grinders, but again you can do it by hand. But as I've got the power tools, I'm going to use them, funny enough. See where it's been bashed about. I was careful not to take much off of the top here because with a mattock, same as like a pickaxe, that's where it holds itself in on like a taper, so if it took too much off it'd just fall off the end. You can see I'm working it right into the end grain because that's where you'll get most of your rot will start, because the water will soak up in the end grain. It's not so much about the look for this, it's more just preserving it, and it'll help keep the dirt and grime off it. So, makes it a bit better to use and lasts quite a bit longer. You can see when you put it on the end grain how much it really soaks it in. Almost see it disappearing. I should probably have to give it another coat, but when it dries, let it dry and give it another coat if it needs it really. On handles, I would recommend using oil. Whether you use boiled linseed or not is up to you, but not a fan of varnishes and paints on the handles where you grip it, because it just doesn't, it's not the same. You don't get the grip and it can crack and splinter and be rough on your hands, whereas oil soaks it in and does it the world of good. As you can see, it's not bad for its first coat. I'll do it quite well. So I shall let that dry, and then probably tomorrow I'll give it another coat, and then put the head back on and we're ready to go. So when at that stage I'll come back and let you know. So thanks for watching, catch you in a minute.